If you've been listening to the Tenpenny Files for a while, you've heard about the battles that we Americans face, from China and the CCP to the open society groups funded by George Soros, to the Marxist arm of the Pride movement, to socialist Marxist takeover of our educational systems, and more. Today's guest, Ken Abramowitz, and his book, The Multi-Front War, ties this together and offers suggestions of what we can do about it. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. My name is Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, and I'm your host. If it matters to your body, your freedom, or your future, we talk about it here. There's something new every day, so please join us daily. We talk about politics, history, astronomy, travel, food, farming, fitness, and of course, vaccines, health, and health policies. Once a week, I have a conversation with pastors and authors who talk about faith and biblical principles. Join me daily, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern for the Tenpenny Files to hear from voices that have often been ignored, silenced, or censored. But before we begin today's episode, I want to invite everyone to become a Tenpenny Prime member. Go to primemembership.drtenpenny.com, primemembership.drtenpenny.com, learn more and support our work. And one last thing, welcome to all of our regular listeners and our new time listeners. We are grateful to have you here. We hope you join us every day. Now, let's get started. Today's conversation is with Ken Abramowitz, the managing general partner and co-founder of NGN Capital, a $450 million worldwide healthcare venture capital fund, to talk about his book, The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and racial strife. Ken, I think you covered it all just in the title of your book. Thank you so much for joining me here today from Tel Aviv. We're so glad that you were able to join us.
Yes, great to be with you.
You know, you outline many fronts where America is under attack. And it seems as though your book sort of starts and focuses on the Obama administration from 2008 to 2016. You list Obamacare, and the assault on coal and gas, the toxic banking regulations. These assaults have been going on for a really long time. But do you think these modern attacks on our culture that started probably 20 years ago in earnest, when Obama was in office, do you think that these are different than the same assaults that we've been facing since the 1940s?
Well, if you want to go back into history, we can. There's a few dates to look at that are very important in American history, or let's say recent American history. So, for example, in 1962.
Hmm.
The Supreme Court, I believe it was the Warren Supreme Court, said that there should not be school prayer. Now you would say, well, that's not a huge issue, but it actually was a huge issue. I remember, I was 12 at that time. I remember when I went to public school, we would have 2 minutes of silence. And they didn't tell you the teacher didn't say what to think about. She said 2 minutes of silence. I guess it was probably implied it had something to do with our Judeo-Christian culture. And so we all thought about something for 2 minutes, and that was it. Now, that's unconstitutional. I mean, that's something a Supreme Court has to be involved with. That's something that society will suffer tremendous pain if every kid thinks to themselves for 2 minutes. Now, but the reason it was significant, besides the issue that I mentioned, is that when it reminds me of the Republican convention a few years ago, the one that was done by Zoom. And I was listening to maybe 25 different speakers. I don't remember one of them, except an impassioned a black pastor from North Carolina. And he says to the audience, "My mama told me," and he goes like this: "When you take God out of the society," and then he uses his other hand, "the devil marches in." And I remember I said to myself, boy, that mama was pretty smart mama, because she died. I'm a professional analyst, so anyone who does great analysis, I immediately acclaim their thoughts. And she hit it. The nail on his head. So when we took God out of our public schools three false narrative pagan religions marched right in. The Supreme Court either didn't know that, didn't care, or was working for the three false narrative pagan religions, which marched in when we took the Judeo Christian God out. Someone else was going to move in. Okay, so who moved in? So I color code them: the reds, the greens, and the blues. The reds are the communists, traditional color for communists. Green are the Islamists, traditional color for Islam. And blue are the globalists, traditional color for the United Nations helmet.
Hmm.
Or see, the United Nations phony soldier, pretend soldier with a blue helmet. So the reds are the communists. That's like China, Russia, North Korea, Cuba, previously Venezuela. The greens are the Islamists. That would be Iran on the Shiite side and Qatar, Turkey, Pakistan on the Sunni side. And then you have the globalists. That would be the UN, World Economic Forum, the drug cartels, and certain social media companies. So
Wow.
those false narratives, I call them pagans because they hate our Judeo-Christian God. And the Reds are atheists. The Blues are atheists. The Greens believe in Allah, but Allah is basically a reaction to Judeo-Christian God. There's no similarity between the Judeo-Christian God and Allah. Allah is like the opposite to a Judeo-Christian God. And so those three false narratives marched right in. And so we're paying the penalty of that right now as those pagan religions. The reason I call them pagan is one of the hallmarks of pagans. They believe in human sacrifice. And the Reds, look at Russia right now. They've killed 1 million of their own people, couldn't care less.
And
Uh,
China.
look at China over the years. I think, if I remember correctly, China killed something like 50 million people in taking over the country as the communists took over the country in 1949. The Russians killed, I think, something similar to that. And Iran would kill everyone in the world if they could. If they had a nuclear weapon, they promised to kill everyone in America. That's 350 million people, and everyone in Israel, that's 10 million people. So, and so therefore I call them pagans because they believe in human sacrifice. In Judeo-Christian country is believes in life. We do anything to save a life. Just go visit a hospital someday and look at all the wonderful things the doctors and nurses do to save a life. So that's a long answer to your quick question. It started in 1962, but you could argue started before, but I think that quickly summarizes your question.
Well, I think that that is a really good launching place because I don't think that most people that I've talked to on this show and otherwise launch what's happening in America today, the takeover of America by the CCP and all the Marxist revolutionists that are happening here, really starts with the removal of prayer from the schools. I think that's a really good place to start.
Mhm.
And
By the way, if you want to go back a little further to 1917, when the Russian Communist Party under Lenin illegally took over Russia, they immediately launched an effort to take over the world. So, and they started invading our schools in the 30s. But I picked the 1962 as a key recent history year to look at.
It's a very good place to start and kind of an eye-opening place to start. I think it's very good. You know, you start your book, The Multi-Front War, by saying America and most of Western world are misled by both the radical left and Islamist false narratives. How did these anti-liberty messages get so entrenched in our society? I mean, you started by saying it's by removing prayer from the schools, but that can't be the only way that we have been so consumed by these Marxist thoughts that are happening in America today.
Well, I'll give you a few other tidbits. Recent history, 1984. KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov, a big hero of mine. Unfortunately, I never met him. I only met him through YouTube. And he passed away, in quotes, passed away. I'm sure someone in the Russian KGB killed him. And he came to America and was interviewed. And the interviewer asked a few questions, but just summarizing what Yuri Bezmenov said, he said, I'm 50 years old. I've been in the KGB for 25 years. My job was to undermine America and American democracy, and by helping to destroy your culture. After 25 years, I realized I didn't want to do that anymore. I liked American culture. I didn't want to destroy American culture, even though that was my job. So I defected. I had huge risk to myself and my family. We defected. And here I am today to tell you about the KGB. He said, many people think the KGB is like the CIA or FBI. And he says, you're 15% correct. But
Wow.
85% of what we did was undermine democracies around the world. We believe in what he calls active measures. There's a Russian word for it that I can't pronounce, but he said, we believe in active measures. So we actively involve ourselves in other people's societies to undermine their culture. And he said, our KGB right now is invading your K through 12 schools, teachers' colleges, universities. Then he said to the interviewer, and if you don't stop them now, in 2 generations, which is now, the KGB will have taken over your culture and you will no longer be able to speak to your kids and grandkids. They will not listen to reason. They will be so brainwashed that you cannot have logical conversations with them. And he said, stop the KGB now. Of course, no one listened. And here we are 2 generations later from Russian communist infiltration. And then the Chinese said to themselves, well, if the Russians can do it, we can do it. And then the Qataris said, and how about us? And Iran said, we can do it. And Turkey said, how about me? And basically all of our enemies followed the KGB into our culture to undermine it in different ways. And so that's the compounding effect that we're now seeing either in our schools, in Hollywood, our book publishers, our media, social media, the Democrat Party, which has basically become the mouthpiece of the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. It used to actually be the Democrat Party. They cleverly kept the name, but now it's basically, as I said, the mouthpiece of the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues, which was one of their objectives, is to take over one of the political parties. And so that's why I'll put it all together, we're in the mess that we're in now.
Did no one see this coming in our government, or did they just allow it to happen? Was it just, incrementalism that just happened a little bit by little bit? And or did why did nobody try to stop any of this?
Yeah, there's an old expression sometimes people use about the frog in water. If you
Right,
People say you throw a frog in boiling pot of water, I never did it, the frog jumps out. But if you put him in the frog in warm water and then just raise the temperature, he ends up dying in the pot or wherever you put him. So I think that's not a bad analogy for what happened. It was very incremental, and it took place over, here we have for 40, 65 years, but the seeds were in place in the 1930s. And and there were seeds before that. But so I would say if I wanted to characterize it, our outside enemies know us better than we know ourselves, and
wow.
they knew our vulnerabilities, and they figured with money that they could corrupt our society. And
Well, they've done
they
it.
half did it. They did a good job. Half of our country is corrupt to the core. The Democrat states are basically the Reds, the Greens, the Blues. They've taken over half of our country, and we have to stop them. We have to. It's now time for America to make its final stand for its existence.
I agree with that. And so many times when I've had conversations with lots of guests on this show, it's like, and particularly the people that I talk to about what's happening in our educational system between high school and college and the whole Marxist socialist anti-religious sort of perspectives that happen in colleges these days. It's like, and they say like 80% of the professors are Marxist socialists and are trying, if they haven't gotten you by the time they graduated from high school, they're gonna get you in college. And I've wondered, has anybody ever looked historically that no socialistic society has ever survived? None of the Marxism has ever worked. Anti-capitalism has never worked. Why are they, and I've yet to really understand why they are so intent to demolish this country and rip up the Constitution. Because if America's gone, then what?
Well, I have a little joke about that sometimes I use when I'm having dinner with friends. So I'll use it with you. So
Okay.
to pretend that I told you, you can steal one thing in life. I know you don't want to steal anything, but just pretend. I say
Okay.
you can steal one thing in life, and I promise you, you won't go to jail. What would you steal? So most people say, well, I don't want to steal anything. It's unethical, it's immoral, it's against the law, it's against the Ten Commandments. But this is a joke. So you told me I could steal one thing in my mind, not in reality. So I'll go to my local bank and steal all the money in the bank. So then I say you can't do. I gave you a chance to steal one thing one time and get away with it. What would you steal? They go, oh yeah, you're right. I go to New York and find the biggest bank in New York and walk in and steal the biggest vault that they have in New York. I say, okay, great. You can't do better than that. Then people start laughing. They say, can I go to Fort Knox and steal all the gold? I go, in this analogy joke, yes. Okay, I'm going to hire a U-Haul, a big U-Haul, a truck U-Haul, and pull up at Fort Knox and tell them to put all the gold in my U-Haul. And then there's a silence, and I said, you can do better than that. They go, better than stealing all the gold in Fort Knox? I don't know what you're talking about. I said, how about if you go to Washington and you go to the Bureau of Engraving and you tell them to give you the printing press? Then you can keep printing money and more money. If you go to Fort Knox and you pretend you can steal the gold there, but gold doesn't reproduce, right? There's no reproductive organs in gold. So whatever gold you steal, you'll have. If you go to the printing press and the Bureau of Engraving, you can keep printing money. Basically, that's what I just described the Democrat Party. They realized that since it's basically a criminal organization, they went through all the thinking in my little joke and then came to the logical conclusion, we have to become president. Our candidate has to become president. We have to take over the House and the Senate. And then we just keep printing money and we keep paying people to vote for us. And meanwhile, we steal 20% of it for ourselves. That's a different story. But we take 80% of it and pay people to vote for us. So what benefits you want? You want a benefit for healthcare? Great. We'll print the money and give it to you. How about kids, grandkids, house, retirement? You go down the list and you keep buying people's vote with someone else's money while you're stealing 20% off the top. So I'm explaining to you why criminals behave like criminals, because it gives them a chance to have a lot of money and a lot of power, and they don't have to do a lot of work other than muscle their way through the system.
Wow. Well, I guess that still doesn't explain though, when America's gone, if they succeed, if the KGB succeeds with its infiltration, if the Arabella advisors and everything that George Soros wants to do infiltrates with the open society, with the CCP gets us there. I've had on Casey Fleming on my show with his book, The Red Tsunami, and he says, Sun Tzu in The Art of War said, death by 1,000 cuts, and he thinks America's at about 975 cuts, and we have to really work hard against the CCP and everything that's happening there. You mentioned the KGB, and then there's Iran, and then the internal turmoil of the Democratic Party. If, let's say, in 10 years, 15 years, they totally succeed and there's no America, that it's been completely imploded, no constitution, no rights, our passports no longer can allow us to travel, etc. Then what? What happens if there's no more America?
Well, let me I have a couple things to answer to that. Uh, um, a couple times a year, my wife and I are at somewhere, and there's a forest, and we go through the forest. My wife knows a
Mhm.
lot about nature. I don't. I'm a city guy, and she says to me, "Oh, look at that parasite strangling that tree." And I go, "What tree? What parasite? What are you talking about?" And then you see that there's like a weed that's wrapping itself around the tree and sucking nutrients from the tree. And 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 you know what happens, I don't know, 5, 10 years later, whatever it is, the tree dies and the parasite dies with it. So I say to myself, if I could talk to the parasite, I'd say, Mr. Parasite, excuse me, let me explain something to you. Maybe you don't know this. If you keep sucking nutrients out of that tree, in 5 or 10 years, the tree will die and you will die with it. Why are you doing that? And the parasite in my imaginary conversation says, hey, buddy, I'm a parasite. That's what I do. I, I have to eat, right? You eat. I don't go to McDonald's or 7-Eleven. You do, but I have to eat. I have a right to eat, and I strangle trees for a living. And don't talk to me about the long term. I'm hungry today, and I'm going to suck some more nutrients. So that's one analogy I can give to you. The other is that about 10% of the people in the world or a country are criminals. I don't know why they're criminals, but they're criminals. And just like with the parasite, if I said, Mr. Criminal, you don't understand. You you should set up a business. You're very smart. You're talented. Wow. And set up a business and sell something on Amazon or whatever it is, or make a lot of money. And then you don't have to steal for the money. There's plenty of very exciting, stimulating jobs. And the criminal says, hey, buddy, it's just like the parasite. Hello, I'm a criminal. That's what I do. And I steal money. I let other people work. It's very nice of them to work. And when they make enough money, I go steal it. So that's, you're talking about human nature. And there's always 10% of the people who can't make it the normal way, but they have to eat, right? They have families, and they would say, "Look, so I didn't go to college. I didn't go to graduate school. I don't have a PhD. I didn't go to medical school. Whatever it is, and here I am, and I'm 43, and I have a wife and some kids, and I have to eat, and I don't have any particular skills, but I'm really good at stealing money." And so, roughly 10% of the people are criminals, and they can't stop themselves.
So even if if the Democratic Party and the KGB sucks the life out of America, they don't really care because they're eating it because they need to eat today.
Yeah, it's the short term I'm eating. Long term, the tree dies, or the company dies, or the country dies. I'll worry about that some other day.
I see. Wow. You mentioned, I really like your analogy of the red, green, and blue. And you mentioned, the Islamic people with Iran at the head. And you mentioned that Iran would kill all of us if it had a nuclear bomb. That Iran is working hard to destabilize the world. And that seems to be kind of the political mantra today. Now, you probably have a different perspective since you live in Tel Aviv, but can you explain why it's true that it really is Iran that really wants to blow up the whole world? And do you think that that's changed since the supreme rulers are dead?
Well, we're fighting 3 wars with Iran. Let me explain. We're
Okay.
fighting a 100-day war, roughly 40 days of physical kinetic war, 60 days roughly of pretend negotiation, as if you could negotiate with a parasite. It's back to my analogy in the forest. So that's one war. We're fighting a second war with Iran since 1979, when the Islamic leaders took over in 1979 with a coup, took over the government, never had a real election, but just they're criminals. So they this took over the government, and they've been bleeding the country dry ever since. And because they only care about the 10% of the people, the 10% who are criminals. And so That's the second war that we're fighting. And when they took over, they promptly promised to kill everyone in America and everyone in Israel. Death to America, death to Israel. Now, America is a 90% Christian country. Israel's an 80% Jewish country. But they announced that they want to kill everyone in America, everyone in Israel, because America and Israel are stopping them from taking over the world. So they hate America, they hate Israel. I have another 1 minute analogy. I walk into I'm a criminal. I walk into the bank and I want to steal money, and I start yelling, "I hate this bank! I hate the manager! I hate the tellers! I hate it!" And someone comes to me and says, "Hey, buddy, what are you so angry, upset?" "I'm so angry. I hate everyone in the bank." "Why do you hate everyone?" "Oh, I came here to rob the bank, and they won't let me rob it. The guards won't let me rob it. The teller won't let the bank manager. That's why I hate them, because I'm a criminal. They won't let me rob the bank." So Iran is basically a criminal organization, wants to take over the world, kill everybody, steal everyone's money. And then, so they're angry at America and Israel because America and Israel won't let them take over the world. So they said, okay, fine, I'm going to kill everyone in America, everyone in Israel, then take over the world, make everyone my slave, and steal all their money. Okay, that's a 47-year war. And then there's a 1400-year war going on. 1400 years ago, roughly in the year 630, Muhammad was around, and he and his followers in Saudi Arabia said, Saudi Arabia is not big enough for me. We want to take over the world. We're criminals. We're going to kill everybody. Let me think. Oh, Allah, that's it. Allah told me that we have to kill everybody and steal their money. So we're going to expand into another 55 countries, half of which were Christian countries. No one even remembers anymore. And we'll take over half of the world, half of the known world. And if we can, we'll take over all of the world, except that the remaining Europeans stopped them. The Indians stopped them, the Chinese stopped them, and that's why they are where they are. So we're fighting a 1400-year war, a 47-year war, and a 100-day war simultaneously. We don't know that, but we are.
Wow. That's really, that kind of puts things in perspective, of what's going on. And I don't think that most Americans, I mean, they don't teach history, and they don't teach American history anymore in high school and college, and they really don't teach even a world history at all unless you specifically seek it out and you want to study it. So I don't think that we are really aware of those sorts of things that are happening. It's like, why are we doing this? Well, you just gave a great explanation for that. So I want you to hold on to that thought for just a minute, because we're going to have to take a short break to hear from our sponsors for AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays the Tenpenny Files on the iHeartRadio network daily, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you've missed any of these great conversations with authors of these really great books, and I'll tell you, I've read all of them, the conversations you can find at the Tenpenny Files by putting the Tenpenny Files in Spotify, Pandora, Apple, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studios, or you can go to my website at drtenpenny.com, or you can follow us on X, Instagram, Rumble, and YouTube. We've got a great message coming up from our sponsor. Please listen to them and support our sponsors, because they're the ones who support us. We will be right back with more from Ken I knew I was going to mess that up. Abramowitz, the multi-front war, defending America from political, Islam, China, Russia, pandemics, and racial strife. We will be right back. We'll sit tight. We will be right back.
Joel Lombardi here, Ironhawk Financial. Great news. Ironhawk Financial has just partnered with Dr. Tenpenny. She brings you the fire about your health and how to keep the government out. Ironhawk Financial, we do the same thing about your wealth. Unfortunately, you need health and wealth. So for more information, go to drthawk.com, and I look forward to meeting you.
The wellness blanket is one of my favorite things to have in my house. I sleep with it every night. I travel with it. I put it in my suitcase, because it's not just a blanket. It actually acts as a protective medical device. It blocks out EMFs while it's helping you to sleep. You will sleep so well with this. You get into a deep sleep, and it really changes the pH in your chemistries in your body. It's something that you will want to have forever, not only for yourself, but for the rest of your family. Go to thewellnessblanket.com and use the affiliate code DRT10 to get 10% off on your purchase. Well, welcome back, everyone. Today's conversation is with Ken Abramowitz, the author of The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife. Let me tell you just a little bit more about our guest today. Ken is a managing general partner and co-founder of NGN Capital, a $450 million worldwide healthcare venture capital fund. Ken has published several notable studies on healthcare service companies, major medical mergers, and cardiovascular device innovations. In 2009, he was inducted into the Wall Street Analysts Hall of Fame, ranking 15th out of 15,000 analysts. He currently serves on the board of directors for Cardiovalve and Therapeutics. And he's joining us here today from Tel Aviv. So it's just so great to have you here, Ken. Thank you so much and welcome back to the show.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Why is it, that you say in your book that none of the West strategies have been addressed with what you call the four terror heads of the Islamic Hydra? Why have Americans' leaders ignored their responsibility to protect our country?
Let me just give you one last piece of history.
Okay, that's great. This is really good. I love this.
By the way, if you were a professional criminal in charge of the education system, would you be teaching a law course on criminal behavior? No. So as the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues took over our educational system, they said, we have to make sure that people don't understand world history. We don't want them to understand that everything we stand for fails, whether it's communist nonsense, Islamist nonsense, or globalist nonsense. We don't want them to know that history. Because if they do, they'll say, hey, wait a minute, this didn't work in year something or other didn't work, and that year didn't work, and this year did. They don't want you to know that. So let me give you one more piece of history. Go back into time. Now we're going to go back to biblical times. Most of the Bible, the Old Testament, was characterized the time between 3,800 years ago and 3,300 years ago. 3,800 years ago was Abraham, the first Jew. And 500 years later, Moses received, according to the Bible, the Torah, received the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. And so let's go to 3,300 years ago. 3,300 years ago, the world was controlled by pagans. And every single governor, mayor, king, queen, whoever, any person in power was a pagan. Believed in human sacrifice, believed, using an American term, whereas we believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people, minus the 10% who are criminal. They believed in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for the 10% who were criminals, because they were criminals. Okay? There was no democracy 3,300 years ago. There was the way you got elected is you killed enough people till they say, I think you should be the king. I'm afraid of you. You're the king. Okay, fine. And by the way, how do animals? Sometimes I watch on National Geographic specials. How do elephants decide who should be the big elephant? Well, they just keep killing each other or hurting each other till someone says, you're the biggest elephant. Why don't you take all these young female elephants and have a good time? And because we're not going to challenge you until someone younger gets up and challenges them. Okay. So human beings are just, I hate to say this, a touch above animals, but sometimes not very high above animals. So the Jews come along 3,300 years with the Ten Commandments and say, thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not steal. Now you're you're a pagan professional criminal, and you hear about the Ten Commandments. You say, 10 Commandments, who invented that nonsense? I hate the Jews. And that started anti-Semitism when Jews came with the rule of law. Now, then go fast forward 1,300 years to Jesus, and Jesus, the beginning of Christianity, adopted the Ten Commandments, and who was running the world in Jesus' time? Criminals. Like, hello, it's a repeat of Moses with the Ten Commandments 3,300 years ago, and now we have Jesus with the Ten Commandments 2,000 years ago. So everyone says, I hate Jesus. I hate the Ten Commandments. I hate the beginnings of Christianity. It was actually Judaism at that time, but it evolved into distinct Christianity. But the roots are Judaism. So so that's why everyone hated the Christians at that time. Christians brought the rule of law. All the countries were run by criminals. Okay, fast forward to today. What percentage of countries are still run by criminals? I'm going to answer the question, 90%. So in 3,300 years, we went from 100% of the countries run by criminals to 90% of the countries run by criminals. Great progress for 3,300 years or 2,000 years of Christian history. Okay, so the 90% of the countries that are run by criminals, they hate the Jews and they hate the Christians. They hate the Ten Commandments. They hate the rule of law. They hate the Constitution. They hate the Bill of Rights. They hate the wisdom of the Declaration of Independence. The point I'm getting to is 3,300 years ago, the battle was God versus the pagans in Moses' time. 2,000 years ago, the battle was God versus the pagans in Jesus' time. And here we are, we're still fighting God versus the pagans. Nothing's changed since biblical times. So even though in my book I argued that we're in World War III, you could argue it's actually World War I. It's been a nonstop battle between God and the pagans, and here we are 3,300 years later.
Wow, so well said. Oh my goodness. That sums the whole thing up and makes total sense of really what's going on and been going on. You know, you talk a little bit in your book, The Multi-Front War, about the European countries that have abdicated their responsibilities and that NATO is underfunded and they want the US to pay for everything. And Trump has taken the money out of NATO. He's tried to say he wants to change the UN, which I don't think he's putting much emphasis on right now. But what steps do you think must be taken to preserve Western culture throughout Europe and then extend it into the US?
Well, America personifies Christianity, Israel personifies Judaism, and of the 192 or so countries in the world, America and Israel are the only two that are operating properly, according to me. I didn't say perfectly, I said properly. Remember, humans we're not perfect. So you're not going to get a perfect America or a perfect Israel. But we're the only two countries that function properly. And my definition of properly, countries that can protect life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 100% of the people, minus the 10% who are criminals. So we, America, I'm not an Israeli citizen, the Israeli society, basically has to impose their goodness on the forces of evil. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's many ways. First, we have to clean up our own act. Half of our country's been corrupted by the Democrats, and there's 600 sanctuary cities and states in this country. You can't have sanctuary cities and states in a country. We're one country. And we have to eliminate sanctuary cities and states. And if the mayors and governors are not happy, we have to start putting them in jail. Now, I have another, you can say, gee, that sounds so extreme. So I have another analogy if you want to listen to it.
I mean, that's not extreme at all. I think it's spot on.
Pretend Abraham Lincoln comes back to life for one day. And he joins our interview today, and he says, "Look, I'm only here for a day. I don't know how they let me out of the cemetery, but I have to go. Right, give me a quick update of what America's like." Well, half of the states, President Lincoln, the Democrats used to be called Confederates. They changed their name to Democrats. They moved up north, and they took over half of the country and created 600 sanctuary cities and states, and they don't recognize the right of the federal government to come in and rule them. By the way, they're happy to take money from the federal government, but they don't like when people in uniform show up with guns and arrest criminals. And he says, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "I fought a war over this. Remember, 1861 to 65, and I got shot soon after the war because I was so determined to keep our country not divided, but unified. And I unified the country. I had to do it with force. And I eliminated the sanctuary cities and states. And that's why you have a union. And you morons, 160 years ago, forgot all the lessons of the Civil War that I fought and died for. Send me back to the cemetery. I don't even want to, I don't want to talk to you morons anymore. I'm going right back to the cemetery. See you later. It's a scandal. And so before we preach to Europe how they can get their act together, we have to get our act together. We've closed the borders. We have to deport 10 million people, not easy. Basically, everyone who came in under the open borders has to be deported. And because they're criminals, they broke the law, right? But I hate to do this. One last analogy. I find out where you live. I break in at 2 o'clock at night, pretend you don't know me, and I say, I'm hungry and thirsty. Can I see what's in the fridge? And would you mind if I sleep on the sofa here in the living room? The answer is no, you have no rights. You broke into my house at 2 o'clock. I'm calling the police. They're coming in 38 seconds. I hope they kill you. And get the hell out of my house. Okay, I have no rights. So whoever came into this country illegally during the Biden times should be deported, no questions asked. And they can reapply to come in like human beings as opposed to like animals. But that's a separate story. So we have to get our act together, criminalize sanctuary cities, start arresting some mayors, start arresting some governors, force them to have elections that are real, not phony, like we're witnessing right now in California, and basically keep the union together. Do what Abraham Lincoln did without killing 700,000 people, but do it in a peaceful way and get this country back, Humpty Dumpty, get the egg back together again.
I think that that's a great analogy. I love your stories because it so brings it home. It makes difficult concepts easy to understand. So it's really great. I think that it seems as though the focus now, since we started this, since America got involved with this skirmish with Iran that you now say is a 1400-year war, which makes a lot of sense. It seems as though President Trump is trying to befriend everybody and try to be friends with all the Arabs. And in your book, you talk about a Muslim concept called taqiyya. For the audience, did I say that correct?
Yeah.
It's taqiyya. It's spelled for the listener. It's Taqiyya. That's why I struggled over that a little bit. And it says in the Quran, let not believers take the unbelievers for friends. So we're trying to, and I've seen like a lot of these things that have happened in Qatar and in the EAU and these big presentations, and they show the faces of the Arab sheiks and that sitting there. Not even knowing this, which you talk about in your book, I'm thinking they've got to think that this is crazy, that this white guy from the United States is coming over here trying to solve our problems and pretend like we're friends, when even in the Quran it says believers are allowed to show friendship to the disbelievers outwardly, but never inwardly. What does that mean for this board of peace and for the Muslim countries that Trump seems to be trying to make nice with and bring them all together and be friends?
Well, I'll give you another analogy. I hope you want another analogy. There's 8 billion people in the world. They all look like us. Okay, eyes, ears, all the normal things that human beings have. But half of them behave like animals and half behave like human beings. So I have an expression: when a human being behaves like an animal, I'm going to treat them like an animal. I don't want to treat them like an animal, but if they're going to behave like an animal, I don't have a choice but to treat them as an animal. So my little analogy joke is President Trump is talking to Steve Witkoff, his chief negotiator. And he says to Steve, you won't believe this. All the animals in the zoo, Washington Zoo, just escaped. It's terrible. I can't believe it happened. They're all out of their cages. I want you to go to the Washington Zoo right now and negotiate with the animals and get them back in their cages. So it pretended in Washington animals speak English. So Steve Witkoff says, Mr. President, I negotiate with humans. I've never negotiated with animals. Are you want me to do this? Oh yeah, you have to do it right away. Go to those animals. And then Witkoff says, okay, Mr. President, if you want me to talk to the animals, I need to go with 25 Navy SEALs. I need machine guns, one for them and one for me. I need a knife and a whip. And collectively, we'll convince those animals to go back in their cages. So the point I'm getting to is they're animals. You have to treat them like animals. You wouldn't go and say, pretend you can speak to an animal. You wouldn't say, oh, Mr. Tiger, please just turn around and go back to the cage. The tiger says, I'm not going back to the cage. In fact, I'm hungry and you look like lunch. No, Mr. Animal, you didn't hear me properly. You go back to the cage. We're going to give you lunch. In fact, you can order it. We have like a menu here. What do you want? You want a pizza? You sandwich? What? And the lion says, you haven't heard me. I don't know what a pizza is. I don't know what a sandwich is. You are my lunch. And so that's the point. When you're dealing with animals, I hate to say this, we have to treat them like animals. The reds, the greens, and the blues are all animals, or the equivalent of animals, or they act like animals, and therefore we have to be tough with them. You only negotiate with when you're dealing with a human. For example, you want to buy my house, I want to buy your house, whatever it is. You want a certain amount, I want a certain amount. We figure it out, and we're both happy. Okay. But when you're dealing with animals, there's no win-win situation. Either the animal eats you or me, or we put the animal back in the cage. There's no like compromise solution. And that's what American negotiators don't understand, is how to negotiate with evil. And it has to be through force. There's no non-military solution when dealing with evil. I hate to say that.
That's so true. And I think that Americans, you can take anybody in the world, anywhere in the world, and you can put a suit and tie on them. And suddenly Americans somehow think they think just like Americans, just because they've got a suit and tie on, they look like us. So suddenly they've been transformed into thinking and acting, behaving like Americans. And it's just not true. And for the listeners, I just want to repeat that one more time, that the Quran says believers are allowed to show friendship to the disbelievers outwardly, but never inwardly. I think that's really very powerful. You talk about that in your book. I think it's really important for people to understand. And like you just explained and expounded on further, you can't negotiate with a criminal. You can't negotiate with a tiger that wants to eat you for lunch. So, one of the other, what do you think we've got a few minutes left in our show here today. I loved your book. I wish we had another couple of hours to talk about it. But as you were researching this and writing this and putting this together in such an understandable way that we see what the problems are happening against us, was there anything that was a surprise to you when you did the research for this book that really like, wow, that I need to really write about that and bring that out further?
Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I started this book on 9/11.
Oh,
When
wow.
I and you and all of us were traumatized after 9/11, I said to myself, what can I do about this? I'm just an individual. And I still am a business analyst in the healthcare field. And so I said to myself, well, I only know how to do one thing, and that's I analyze. So I'm going to take my skills that I developed in analyzing the healthcare industry for 25 years at that time, and I'm going to apply it to national security. I'm going to teach myself national security simultaneously with maintaining my healthcare career. So I've now spent 25 years teaching myself national security, almost 50 years in healthcare, but it's at the same time. And so the biggest surprise when I spent 10 years educating myself and then started writing, I set up a website, savethewest.com. I started writing articles every 2 weeks. I published 4 editions of my book, The Multi-Front War. And my biggest surprise is how obvious it was to me that we're in World War III and the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues have declared war on us. As obvious it was to me, my biggest surprise is how unobvious it was to everybody else.
Wow.
And so I said to myself, I got to publish this book. I've got to explain to people that we're in World War III, it's actually World War I, but I said we're in World War III, where we're fighting the bad guys, Reds, Greens, and the Blues. They're using 7 forms of warfare against us. I'll tell you in 22 seconds, but if you multiply 7 forms of warfare times 3 color-coded groups of bad guys, we're fighting 21 wars simultaneously, and we don't know that. I have to alert the public, the government, our officials that we're fighting a 21 front war, and they have to be ready. They have to plan for it. Just to finish this issue, the 7 forms of warfare are physical war, that's obvious, chemical, biological, COVID, fentanyl. Number 3, cultural war. For example, we in your audience, we're all cultural warriors. We don't shoot anybody. We don't have uniforms. We don't have bullets. We have words and brains. And number 4, we can fight economically, boycotts. Number 5, lawfare. You can fight with lawyers. Number 6, demographics, moving people around. And number 7 is cyber. So those are the 7 forms of warfare. You multiply it times red, green, and blue, and you have 21 wars. So to answer your question, my biggest surprise is after I figured it out, I was dumbfounded to see how little the population understood because of all the other issues that we mentioned, the dumbing down of the population.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time today because we could expound on each one of those even further. And that's why this book is just packed with facts and is written in such a tone of intense urgency. So it's good for everyone to get a copy of this book. It's not real long and it's very readable, and it's written with a great sense of intensity. The Multi-Front War, which you can find by going to bookstore.drtenpenny.com. And we're out of time here today. So I want to thank everybody who's joining us here today or in the future. We will see you here tomorrow or the next time on the Tenpenny Files. Thank you so much, Ken, for being here with us today. And to everybody else, goodbye and God bless.